Um, Andreas, I am mixing up some Sabi urushi to apply a cloth layer to a mask I'm working on. I didn't record the very beginning part. I didn't think about it at first, but this is a little bit better of a mixing so far than I had on that other video on YouTube. And I don't know if this would help you or not, but here we are. So I have currently in this, there is 100 grams of jinoko. I think I put 10 grams of sawdust, and I think 3 grams of this carbon black. Then I measured in an additional 50 grams of water, and I mixed all of that together first in this container, and then put it onto my glass here and measured out 80 grams of urushi. And I'm currently kneading that in slowly. And I don't know if this texture will help you see kind of what is possible and what you should aim for in your mixture. But I actually think that this texture here, especially after I add the hide glue, is going to be very similar to the texture that was applied to your tea tray. So that's why I wanted to show you that. I think it's going to wind up in a very similar consistency. I mean, honestly, there's already a little bit of a slightly leathery look to this, and I think that is due to just the texture of the sawdust and the jinoko on their own. Like I said, I do actually fire my jinoko in a grill. So mine is a little bit of a darker red here than what you buy from Urushi Watanabe, because straight from the store it looks more of this tan color, this beige. I can barely see it here, but it's more of a beige, and after firing it gets that red consistency. And let's see, and the sawdust I use is actually this. I think it's labeled as boxwood sawdust. You could probably use any kind, but boxwood is what they typically sell. So that may be of help to you, knowing what type of sawdust, because obviously you know that wood is different from one species to another, so even the sawdust will vary and have an impact. Put my water back. I have not yet added any of the hide glue. As I said to you in my message, I actually have found that it mixes much better if you add that last. Why I did it the other way in my YouTube video, I don't know. I just wasn't thinking about it really, to be honest. Ooh. See, I'm very messy, unfortunately. I have accidents like that all the time. I wish I could be very neat and refined in what I do, like the Japanese artisans that I watch, but the truth is, I'm not. And as much as that kind of shames me, I think might be the right word, it's also something that I just have to accept that I am clearly not so clean in my methods and techniques, and yet I am still able to produce work that I am happy with the quality and I think is comparable to the quality of some of the artisans that I respect. So even if the path getting there is sometimes a bit less than ideal and maybe doesn't look great on Instagram or whatever, it's still an okay route. See, I'm messy. It's still an okay route to have. It's just not as pretty, but there's nothing wrong with it. As long as you're not wasteful, you use the materials that you have as wisely as you can, and you commit yourself to doing the best job that you can do with it, and in terms of the quality of the product you produce. To me, that's really all that matters. This is pretty thoroughly mixed, I would say, at this point. Certainly well enough for the purposes I have in mind for it. This, I think, would be a suitable starting point for you for applying to the tray. But let's go ahead and add a little bit of the hide glue so that you can see some of the difference that will make. I'm not going to measure the amount here, but I'm not adding a lot. I don't know if the difference really can show up on camera here, but it actually has added a slight glossiness to this that's already apparent, and does have a bit more of that that leathery texture, pardon me, that you were speaking of. So it doesn't take much to create that effect. It's also thicker. You can see that now it no longer comes off as easily. And it's stickier. So this will do the same thing that mixing the rice paste will do. But in my opinion, it does it better. For two reasons, actually. One is you're actually mixing less foreign material into the urushi. So you're not diluting the urushi as much with the rice content. And two, obviously the tack of hide glue is on its own already much stronger than rice glue. So you're diluting the urushi less and you're getting a lot of tack out of that. I'm not saying that using the rice paste is bad, because obviously is quite common in Japan. but the use of Nikawa or the hide glue is not it's not non-existent. It is used in Japan in some regions, and some techniques and some practices. So it's not necessarily a non-traditional thing, it's just less common. And a lot of that has to do with ease of use. Liquid hide glue is not typically sold in Japan, and using the hide glue made from granules, where you mix it yourself and where it cools and gels at room temperature much faster, is more difficult to do. So the fact that I have access to liquid hide glue, easy access to it, is really kind of the difference between why don't they use this more often in traditional methods. I am mixing all of this, or putting all of this back into this container, because I will not be using the entire batch in my next lacquering session, and covering it in a layer of saran wrap or plastic wrap, and then covering it with the lid, and then wrapping that again with plastic wrap, makes it where I can refrigerate this, and it keeps it this consistency here underneath the plastic wrap for a long period of time, and I don't have to worry about using this in the next day or two, because it will, I can use it for 2, 3, 4 weeks later, as long as I make sure I seal out the air properly. You can also see that despite being a little bit messier in my mixing, I'm still able to clean up everything that I tossed around. So I'm not wasting anything, and again, refrigerating it will help that even more. If you're primarily working on flat shapes, you're not going to really need one of these. But I have found that for round shapes, using a silicone spatula is very helpful to have around, especially when applying the Sabi urushi directly to the round shapes. case you're curious, this mask is actually a clay substrate, and the clay has been treated with a layer of wax, followed by a layer of mold release silicone spray. And on top of that, I painted a layer of Sabi urushi that had some Bengara pigment in it. And I've not done it this way in the past, but I'm going to see if this layer of urushi that is on top of the underlying silicone will lift with the cloth when I remove the cloth from the mold. So currently this does not have any cloth on it at all. I haven't applied any layers to it, and I will need to apply probably 4, maybe 5 good layers of cloth here before I attempt to remove any of it from the underlying mold. But when I do, this will get left behind, hopefully intact for reuse. If I can't get it off intact, which may be an issue, then all I'm losing is some air dry clay that I formed. So, but the wax and the silicone underneath is all an attempt to salvage the mold, and I don't know how successful it will be. In any case, the mask itself is not in question as to whether or not it will be a success, just these initial steps. So I don't know if you want to store that away in your mind for possible future use. At one point, at some point later, I'll be using my fingers on this. That's another thing that I was actually ashamed of in my work, that, oh, but I sometimes use my fingers, you know, along with being kind of sloppy and messy in my workspace. I felt shame for also using my fingers, and I thought it was just something that was perhaps unrefined, unprofessional, and it just showed my total I don't even know the right word, but I was afraid it would be perceived as disrespectful, amateurish, and so on. But when I was in Japan, I actually asked some of the masters that I spoke to in Wajima themselves, like, what do you think of this? And a lot of them just laughed, and they were like, yeah, when the camera is not on and nobody's watching, sure, I use my finger all the time. So it's not as if it's not as disrespectful as I felt that it might be, and as some Westerners told me it was. It's okay, that can actually go back in later. Oh, that one's not loose. So I had no reason to be ashamed, despite what some people told me, despite how I felt. That sense of unprofessionalism, it's really just part of being a craftsman. And urushi is no different, in that sometimes you're not cutting corners per se, but sometimes you do things in a way that, like, once you really know what you're doing, a layperson or somebody who's less involved or less experienced might look at it and be like, oh, that's not how you're supposed to do this. And I'm sure I'm committing many sins of that's not how you're supposed to do this. But using my finger is not one of them. True instances of that's not how you're supposed to do this, I mean, where or possibly I am doing something truly egregious. Hopefully I'm not, but it would not surprise me if I am. And that's just something you have to live with as a person who has taught themselves. And on that note, I think that's okay too, because not everyone should have to pay for a trip to a foreign country to learn from somebody who may require payment, or may be unwilling to teach, or may be less willing to teach a foreigner everything they know, or any number of issues that you may encounter with that. I don't think that should be a requirement of doing a craft. It should be a requirement of doing a craft if you claim to be doing that craft just like the person that might be learning from a master. For example, if I were to say, "Oh, I do Japanese urushi, and I'm a Japanese lacquerware artisan," in that case, I think that claim would absolutely need to be backed up by going to Japan, learning under a master, and so on. But I don't make that claim. I don't do Japanese urushi. I don't do Chinese urushi. And although, in fact, many of my techniques are probably more in line with Chinese urushi craftsmen, incidentally, even then, I don't say, "Oh, this is like Chinese urushi," because I'm making things up sometimes as I go. I learn from videos, I learn from Chinese artisans, I learn from Japanese artisans. I haven't seen any Korean artisans myself, but I have seen Korean work, so I know enough about it that I can look at that work and make educated assumptions about how they did certain things. But my point is, I don't do any of that. I do American urushi. I do Peter Spalding urushi from Tennessee, United States, moved to California. That's the urushi that I practice. And as long as I stay honest and faithful to that while trying to improve what I do and what I do with urushi, going and doing all of those extra steps is, for me, it's not necessary. It's possibly not even helpful. Not if you truly want to be creative, and not if you don't mind learning from your mistakes, because I make mistakes for sure. And my work does not turn out perfect. And there are things that I wish I could do better and try to do better and have been teaching myself to do better and fail to do better at sometimes, despite my desires. But all of those, for me, are valuable lessons that have helped rather than hindered. And I think that it has helped me to have a style that is, I don't know if I would say unique per se, but basically unique. I don't think that a Japanese artisan would look at my lacquerware and say, "Oh, this looks like poorly made Japanese lacquerware." They're gonna say, "Oh, this is different. Where did this come from? This is not Japanese." Now, whether or not that's good or bad is going to be up to them. That's their opinion, and the opinion of, well, anybody who looks at my work, or your work, or anyone's work. And that's fine. But I want my work to be valued, or to be judged, I should say, on its own value. Is this work good? Not because, oh, this is Japanese, this is Chinese, this is untrained, this is whatever, but rather, is this good work? I don't know if that makes any sense. Maybe I'm just talking needlessly, being an idiot, perhaps. Actually, I need to get this out of the way. So I'm going to clean this off. Set it aside. I think the take home message that I was trying to deliver earlier was, if you're doing this and you're not trained by a Japanese master, you're not trained by a Chinese master, you don't need to be ashamed of that. However, you should also own that. You should own, I'm not doing Japanese urushi, I'm doing my own urushi, and whether or not that is inferior or anything else should not be judged based on how it looks when you're working, but rather what the final product is, what the quality of that product is, whether or not that product can be repaired easily, whether or not you know how to repair it if it's broken, whether or not it stands up to time, as well as the lacquerware of any other place, whether or not you're able to create something beautiful. That's what matters. That's how it should be judged. On what I said earlier about not claiming to be making Japanese lacquerware, blah blah blah, etc. I think it's also simultaneously important to give credit, however, to the places that did inspire you, to the techniques that you are learning from various uh, schools of thought regarding urushi, regarding lacquer, because um, as self-taught as I am, and as much as I am making up certain things as I go, it is absolutely wrong to think that I have pioneered anything. Um, Obviously, there is a very, 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 very long cultural tradition that existed long before me, regardless of how I choose to do my lacquer, regardless of where I learned. And I do think that all lacquer traditions had to begin with someone who knew nothing about what they were doing. And I believe that 100%. And so, unless someone, or without, I should say, without someone who knew nothing trying to see what was possible, we wouldn't have lacquerware traditions. There was, in all cases, someone somewhere in the past doing something similar to me, making mistakes, except in their case, I'm sure they made many more because they did not have the benefit of the knowledge that I've had access to. So I'm not doing Japanese urushi, but I have learned from Japanese craftsmen. I have learned from Chinese craftsmen by seeing what they do, by seeing what is possible with what this material is. And I would be absolutely 100% lost and clueless without that backing me up. So I would be nowhere without these traditions existing prior to me. And I think that's important to point out and to note. To give credit and respect to the traditions that came before, even if I'm not overtly trying to mimic one, even if I'm not overtly trying to claim their techniques as mine or their tradition as mine, etc. Still super important to point out. I'd be nothing without them. Nothing. So that distinction is very important to make, I think, and to point out and to acknowledge. I will say, if there's one thing that I truly, truly, truly wish that I could do better, that bothers me and that I have been incapable of fixing, is the tendency of my cloth to lose stray strings in the Sabi urushi mixture as I'm applying it to the cloth, and that sometimes gets back into my container, which is difficult to pull out at times when you need it to be thread free. At the moment, it is not important too much if it is thread free, because many more layers of cloth will be going over this and they won't interfere with future layers, etc. But it's just annoying and makes it a little bit messy, and I don't like it. And I wish I knew how to get around that issue. Looks like I need to cut this. Okay. In this early stage of cloth application for these, I'll just call them experimental shapes, uh, really the only thing that is going to have a significant impact that you really need to make sure you have down is full adhesion in all of the little nooks and crannies, if your object has nooks and crannies. Sometimes you will also encounter areas that have a little bit of additional lacquer pulled to a certain spot, and you should try to eliminate some of that because if it's too thick, it won't cure. However, this stage of urushi does cure very well, even in thicker layers. So it's not so much about necessarily removing every bit of excess urushi underneath, but just making sure that everything is in firm, solid contact, and that any of the bubbles that exist are taken out, just for, more than anything, the structural integrity of the finished piece, because it's easy to miss little air bubbles and such if you're not paying extra special close attention, which you should be, but it helps to get it taken care of now. And that is the ugly beginnings of a mask. I know this doesn't apply specifically to the trays that we spoke about, Andreas, but maybe you'll get something out of this. And if not, well, I was doing it anyway, so. And off to the curing box it goes.